This is a tribute to my Aunt Mary Ellen Ludwick. I don't remember the first time I met Aunt Mary Ellen, the older of Dad's two younger sisters. I also had an Aunt Mary Ellen on my mom's side of the family, out in Oregon. As I understand it, our family moved back to my dad's home state of Ohio around 1969, when I was some 3 years old. Somewhere there's a picture of me at approximately that age in a cowboy hat, trying to hold up Grandpa's shotgun in the kitchen of the old house at 4485 Maple Street, where Aunt Mary Ellen lived her entire life. So that's probably the first time I met her and Uncle Dallas, her smiling, friendly husband from West Virginia. When I think of our visits to Dad's boyhood home, including the 6 weeks in the summer of 1978 when we lived there too, Aunt Mary Ellen and Uncle Dallas and their daughters, Marie and Rebecca, are always there, right along with Grandpa and Grandma, the cuckoo clock and piano in the living room, the enormous round wooden table in the dining room, and the legendary boxcar, where the family had apparently had to live for a stretch of time, out back on the edge of the property. In my memories of her, Aunt Mary Ellen was, like dear Uncle Bob, round-faced, cheery, and genuinely friendly and loving. She also had her own versions of Uncle Bob's otherwise distinctive speech mannerisms. She remains, in my experience anyway, probably the only person in the world who could get as much mileage out of a "well, hollow" greeting as he could. Among other things, you have to draw out the second syllable and make it a little deeper than the other two. But much less like Uncle Bob, who had a quiet, dignified demeanor he could summon for solemn occasions, along with a mischievous air that he let out when he knew he wouldn't offend anyone, Aunt Mary Ellen seemed to remain the same open, ardent, and naturally vulnerable person all of the time. Someone who didn't shield herself from the feelings of the moment, no matter how challenging they might be. From what I could tell, she loved life as much as any of the Walter children did, but unlike Dad or Uncle Bob or Aunt Joyce or Uncle Jerry, Aunt Mary Ellen never held herself in reserve in social situations, an innately exuberant person who retained a touch of innocence throughout her life, beaming like a diminutive bundle of sunshine when she greeted you. I didn't get the chance to appreciate her glow in person all that often in recent decades, but I certainly do recall the last couple of times. The first was at Dad's funeral in Oregon in early April 1997. Aunt Mary Ellen was grieving as much as any of us at the loss of her oldest brother, but after I'd shared a few of our favorite stories about Dad's Ohio childhood during the service, Aunt Mary Ellen's bubbly nature took over, and she was soon regaling us with some of her own favorite funny stories about Big Brother Fred. I'm sorry to say that I don't remember the details of her stories now, but I do remember the laughter and the joy she somehow managed to jar out of all of us, even as we bid farewell and laid my dad's body in the grave. My last meeting with her was much more recent, but of a piece with the one at Dad's funeral. In early December 2015, Aunt Mary Ellen joined Aunt Joyce and Uncle Dan and yours truly in St. Joseph, Missouri, to offer tributes to their other older brother, Uncle Bob. I was already struggling to hold things together when I went over to the funeral home for the casket viewing, but it was impossible not to return that warm, happy smile of hers when she spotted me from across the room and slowly recognized, after all those years, the nephew whose reddish curls, or what was left of them, matched those that she and Uncle Bob had once sported. The next day at the service for Uncle Bob, Uncle Dan and Aunt Joyce sang, and I struggled my way through some favorite memories. But Aunt Mary Ellen went right up to the pulpit and started sharing happy stories of the early days at 4485 Maple Street, including one about a big brother who stood out by the mailbox after her birth and crowed to the world, in a triumphal, sing-songy, taunting voice, she nailed his pronunciation and intonation again, that he had a baby sister now. Once again, it was impossible not to admire her ability to hold within her so much grief and still bubble forth with so much infectious joy at the same time. But that's just who Aunt Mary Ellen was, in my experience anyway. While considering possibilities for this tribute, I disinterred something that my family thoughtfully gifted to me a few years ago, Dad's senior yearbook from Perry High, class of 1959. Sure enough, Aunt Mary Ellen was there too, in the next-to-last row of 8th graders, an unmistakable spitting image of Grandma facing the camera with a crown of thick curls and that curious air of unblushing innocence. It was also an unexpected joy to discover, on the final page of the annual, her autograph to her oldest brother, a message that would very much have pleased devout Grandma Walter, when none of them knew at the time that Dad would, in fact, one day decide to study for the ministry. What I couldn't help also noticing, and delighting in, were both the firm, emphatic, oversized period that Aunt Mary Ellen had drawn to punctuate her earnest advice, and all the enthusiastic flourishes in the handwritten figures, the extra curlicues in the G and the L at the beginning, and in the capital E in her own name, and even in the 3 in her graduation year sign-off. Clearly, she'd been a creature of bold joys and innocent delights from her earliest days. Rest in peace and love, Aunt Mary Ellen.